David Byrne, famoso nos anos 80 como líder do grupo Talking Heads, hoje com uma bem-sucedida carreira solo como músico e artista plástico, sempre foi apaixonado por bicicletas e pedala mundo afora quando viaja em turnê, levando sua bicicleta desmontável. Para ele, pedalar não é só um exercício, mas um meio de melhorar o planeta e a sociedade. Ele acabou virando um ativista político do movimento mundial para tornar as cidades menos congestionadas e mais humanas, através da construção de extensas redes de ciclovias. Byrne, que é o maior divulgador da música popular brasileira no exterior, que descobriu Tom Zé, introduziu os Mutantes para o público americano e fez discos de compilação do melhor da nossa música, volta ao Brasil esta semana para trazer a mensagem de mudança e falar do livro que escreveu, contando suas aventuras pelo mundo. Depois de ler o livro de Byrne, decidi mudar também e passar a ir de bicicleta para o trabalho. Comprei uma igualzinha a dele e Byrne me mostrou como é fácil montá-la. Contei no relógio e ele, apesar de uma certa dificuldade, abriu e montou minha bicicleta em apenas 40 segundos. Depois, quando eu a dobrei para levá-la comigo até o escritório da Globo, apanhei bastante, demorei muitos minutos, mas eu chego lá. Nossa conversa foi no estúdio em Manhattan, onde Byrne cria sua arte e onde falou do futuro das cidades, de sua paixão pelo Brasil e, é claro, da liberdade e das descobertas de quem anda por aí de bicicleta.
So you're bringing to Brazil your ideas about bikes and the future of cities, right?
I don't like to think of myself so much as an advocate or somebody who's telling people what they should do or what's good for them, this kind of thing. There's too many people who do that. But I thought, well, I've been using a bike as my means of transportation in New York for decades, and I thought, I can tell people what my experience is. And I've ridden around in other cities, and I've noticed you kind of get a sense of the city and how it's constructed, the attitude of the city towards its people, how the people feel about the city, which also tells you how they feel about their lives, how they feel about their future, what their philosophy is. It's all there in how they make the place that they live. So I thought, oh, well, I can talk about that, and I can talk about my understanding of how we got to the situation that we're in today, which is that, at least in the United States and in many other places, the car kind of dominates. The car has more votes. If it was considered a democracy, the car has more votes than a person walking. And my feeling is that there should be a more equitable balance there. Not to make the car go away, but to have more of a balance.
How do the bikes go into that?
For me, it came out of pleasure. It came out of not exercising, although as I got older, that part is good too, but a pleasure of just feeling of kind of moving under my own power when I wanted to, and being in control, having the freedom to stop, freedom to go, freedom to stop and talk to someone, or look in a store, or stop at a music club, any of this kind of thing. And I found that it was also in a dense city like New York and like in Manhattan, it's very efficient.
I was in Rio recently, and I tried to bike in a neighborhood called Barra da Tijuca. What's happening in Brazil is that we have a new middle class. 40 million people came out of poverty and became middle class. So they want to buy cars. That's the first thing. That's happening in China, in India, all those emerging countries. And so there are too many cars. I couldn't bike. It was really risky. There were no bike lanes, so I gave up. So what are you going to tell, how are you going to convince these people that associate biking with poverty? Because,
yes.
yeah, that, well, I see what will convince them, congestion. You can't move in Rio or São Paulo because too many cars, you are stopped in traffic. So that maybe will convince them that they should give up their cars and maybe go on a bike. you think that could happen? I mean,
Yes,
there are cities like
congestion.
Bogota that did it.
Yes, Bogota has done it, and other cities are trying various kinds of solutions to relieve congestion and to clear the air in their cities. Baja is south of the center.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay. I could imagine that maybe people who live there, maybe some of those people work in the center, and so it might not be possible for them to bike over the hills and all that to get to work. But they could begin by probably biking locally, like if they have to get some groceries or if they have to go to a local school, to doctor, to a bookstore, to the beach, all those kind of things within that area. That seems very possible, instead of getting the car out to go 1 mile or 2 miles or 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, something like that, which just seems like then you're just going from one parking place to another.
How did they do it in Bogota?
My understanding is that there was, on the table at that time, there was a proposal to build a new highway in Bogota, 600 million or some, that was probably a conservative estimate. And it would have put the city in debt, and it would have not, history shows us that building highways does not relieve congestion. It might relieve it for 5 minutes, and then immediately everyone fills it and buys more cars, assuming that now it will be easier, but it's not. They fill up. The new highways fill up, so they fill up as fast as they can be built. So the solution is not to build more, but to maybe stop building them and find other ways for people to get around. Because those, well, the big highways, besides being expensive, they're like, I don't know, they're like knife cuts that cut through a city. They separate neighborhoods. In a lot of North American cities, they built them along the water. So they, can you imagine if the entire beachfront at Rio was a superhighway, and that to get to the beach you had to go across a huge highway? It would be ugly, and that's the way it is in a lot of cities here. Highways along the rivers, highways along the ocean.
Bogota decided to do the opposite.
They decided to do the opposite. It was much cheaper. They decided to put in high-speed buses, the bus lanes.
Like Curitiba.
Yeah, like Curitiba. They obviously got the idea from, what's his name?
Milênio.
Yeah. And that's cheaper than putting in a train.
Yeah.
And but it can run almost as fast. And they put in pedestrian streets and bike lanes and all this kind of thing. And
they have more bike lanes than New York, of course.
Yeah. So I'm embarrassed to say yes. And besides relieving congestion, I believe it also created communities. It kind of, people came out, congregated. They found that they could relate from one community, one neighborhood could relate to another, could get from one to another, and they began to make connections along this kind of snaking line of communities and neighborhoods. That changes the way people live.
Brazil will host the World Cup in 2014 and Rio the Olympics in 2016. So we are wanting to show the world how great we are. But we're doing the opposite of what Bogota did. We're building more highways and more lanes, existing highways, because we think that will lessen congestion. It's not true.
No, it's been proven that building more highways just brings more traffic and they fill up, and the congestion, it does not solve the congestion problem at all. It's, for some reason, it seems like it will be a solution. So it gets votes, it gets money, building highways. But the proof is that it doesn't solve the problem, and it has not worked anywhere. So eventually, yes, people will go, oh, maybe this is not the best solution here. Maybe we have to look at other ways of doing this. Highways also, I mean, highways, I'm not saying they're all evil, but too many, if they dominate the cities, dominate the landscape, then we've given up something. We've given up something in our lives. And what are we getting in return? Concrete.
Brazil also wants to show the world its culture. And you have helped a lot because you brought musicians from Brazil here and to the world stage with the Beleza Tropical compilations. You rediscovered Tom Zé and you introduced Os Mutantes here. How do you see this projection of Brazilian culture worldwide? What do you think will happen in that area? Do you think about those things?
A little bit. I think that in Brazil you have a culture who one of the main exports, I mean there's lots of trade exports and many kind of concrete things, but one of the main exports is music, or you can call it music and poetry and writing and composers, all this kind of thing. Not too many countries can say that. And it's well, Brazil understands that it's a very important cultural asset, but there's more. There's a lot of there's art and literature and food and just the way people live, the way people talk, the way people, the way they get together and hang out. Those are, I think, important parts of the culture as well. Harder to package as an export, but I think that's something that the world can learn from.
So, have you biked in Brazil?
Yeah. I rented bicycles in Salvador, Bahia.
You didn't bring your own bike?
No.
Are you going to bring it this time?
No. I think I can borrow some. I think I can borrow bikes, and because I'm traveling to so many cities as part of this trip, the cost on the airplane would be very high.
One fascinating thing in your book is that you not only see places around that people normally don't see because you're biking, but also that when you're on a bike you meditate. You're able to, something from the unconscious come up. How is it that?
It's well, maybe not when you're in traffic and you have to be very alert, but if you're on a bike path or riding along a river or along a beach or something like this, which you can do. This morning I came to work here. There's a path along the Hudson River, so I ride along the river and then just come into Soho. Having this kind of mechanical activity, very much like driving in a way, it kind of, the mind then can kind of work on its own, and you start to solve problems, or ideas bubble up, and you don't have to think about it. It just starts to happen by itself. Sometimes by the time you get to work, you have very mysteriously you have an answer to that question that you didn't have an answer to when you were at home.
Tell me about some quirky things that you found maybe in your book or some other memories biking around.
I didn't write about this in the book, but I grew up in Baltimore, which is a city maybe a few hours south of here.
It's a harbor.
It's a harbor city, and like a lot of, it used to be a steel city, it used to be a harbor city. It still has a harbor, but the steel industry is gone. It's a city that it used to have a lot of aerospace industries as well, like building whatever things for the military and for NASA and all that kind of stuff. And most of that is gone as well. It's a city that's fallen on fairly hard times, but there's really interesting things there. There's a sometimes not when I was growing up, but later when I would visit, I would explore a little bit. There's a man that collects light bulbs. All his life he collected light bulbs, so he made a museum in his house. He opens it maybe one day a week or something like that, or maybe you have to call and say, can I visit your collection? And it's this room after room of light bulbs. And it's like something, it's like fiction, but there it is. There's also in another part of town, there's a wax museum called Great Blacks in Wax. That is a history of African Americans in the United States. And it's more or less handmade. It's not Madame Tussauds. It's not very slick and commercial and for tourists. And in this way, it's a little bit imperfect, but very moving. It's much more emotionally involving because it's the people who made it have a story to tell. It's not just a tourist attraction. So those kind of things, and you can bike from one to the other.
Sounds very attractive.
Yeah, it does sound very attractive, but as a city, I think that particular city is a real disaster, which is also something that you would discover on a bicycle and you might not see otherwise. The city has I think it's train lines and a highway that goes right down the middle, and on the east side there's a prison and a ghetto and areas where the houses have been torn down, so it looks like a giant wasteland. It's unbelievable. You wouldn't believe that it's in the middle of a large American city.
Looks like a war zone.
It looks like a war zone. There's a giant hospital complex there, but that's kind of walled off in a way.
Johns Hopkins.
Yeah. And so visitors to the city are sometimes taken to this kind of development by the water that's very nice, and they don't see this the other side.
You have to be on a bike.
Yeah, but on a bike you just kind of wander around and you find yourself in this war zone and you go, this is the other side of the coin of this city.
Talking about war zones, I have been in Detroit. It's awful, this center where there's glass towers of GM, etc. And outside is destroyed, completely devastated, a war zone. But you were able, on a bike, to go further, and you saw a concentric circle, so it becomes like a bike sociology, that you're able to see things in a different way.
Yes, and in some place like that you see these concentric rings where there might be a little bit of office buildings in the center that are still functioning, and then there's kind of desolation, and then there's maybe a ring of people living, trying to continue to live in this city, and then
the suburbs.
The suburbs on the kind of furthest out where people have fled the city.
Life in the suburbs, in the sense of American suburbs, requires automobiles, more oil, and it's going to become impossible, right? It's doomed to fail. So is the future dense cities, because dense cities are more energy efficient?
Hard for people to believe, but a dense city is more green than a suburb with lawns and trees. The lawns and trees don't make a place green. They
need a lot of water.
They need a lot of water, and they require, as you said, cars to get from one place to another. In lots of places, lots of parts of the world, the dream is to have your own house, maybe to have a garden, and to have a car so that you can go wherever you want to go, whenever you feel like it. And maybe some of those things are not practical or economical anymore. The big lawn that only requires a lot of water. We might find ways of getting around that are more economical and less ecologically devastating than things getting everywhere in cars. And maybe in some ways the most important is that when you push people together a little bit more, they find that people actually enjoy being together. We're social animals, and to spread us apart too much, we start to go a little bit crazy.
So cities and bikes are the future?
Yeah, and bikes are only a small part. I think it's part of a much bigger picture.
What picture is the?
I think people are rethinking cities as a place to live. For decades, they were a place to, if you lived in a city, your ambition was to get out. That if you became successful, you would move as far away from the city as you could, and then commute back and forth. Here, you could spend 2 hours in traffic. I don't know what time you have to get up in the morning to get to work, but you could spend an awfully long time sitting in traffic. This is in New York. Probably the same in Brazil. Sao Paulo, forget it. Yeah. I think people are rethinking the idea that, oh, maybe there's a way to have a life in the city, that it can be, in the larger sense, it can be more economical. You can actually do things you want to do, see your friends. It can be pleasant. It doesn't have to be ugly and combative. It doesn't have to be a battle. The cities are realizing this. The cities are also realizing that when they bring people together, you have a kind of creative economic engine. There's a kind of creative economy, that ideas and initiatives and projects happen when people are together that don't happen in the same way when they're spread out.
Yeah.
So that nurturing a place where people want to be together ends up making good economic sense for the city.
And it brings up community and a lot of good stuff.
I think so.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.